Israel over the entire time that we've covered the Middle Eastern news from October 7th of 2023 up until now. We've never seen this happen. This is the first time, and it's across multiple airfields and air bases in the state of Israel. And Matthew, what are people thinking about the reasoning as to why that's happening for the first time ever? And what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so why is this being done? Because it is unprecedented. This is the first time we've ever seen this, by the way. So it's a very big deal. This is literally kind of historic that we're kind of seeing right here, actually. Israel is finally being friends with the United States and letting us use their bases to base our fighter jets from, which is quite nice. 39% said it's to supplement Israeli air defense in the event that Iran retaliates with massive missile fire, while 34% said it's simply to be closer to strike Iranian soil and in physical proximity, and 21% said it's to deter Iran from hitting Israel. So I was actually discussing this with Andrew before we went on the air. This is actually a very, very smart move by the United States because all the intelligence reports were indicating that before the U.S. stationed these fighter jets and stratotankers inside of Israel, that Iran was planning on conducting a preemptive strike against Israel only, not against the United States, but against Israel specifically. So by basing the fighter jets inside of Israel by the U.S. Air Force, they have now essentially deterred Iran from hitting Israel, at least in a preemptive strike temporarily, because now, if Iran wants to strike Israel, they have to not only hit Israel, they're also going to be striking de facto the United States Air Force as well, meaning they're dragging both of us into an immediate conflict where we're going to end up slamming everything that Iran has way worse than we would have normally. So I think it's a pretty smart move, actually. It's a pretty good chess move. Also, there is a secondary reason to it, by the way. The sheer amount of Air Force assets in the region right now are so large that we've run out of space to actually store them. So we kind of had to use Israel because we had nowhere else to base these fighter jets out of. So we had to put them there because we simply ran out of room. So that's another reason as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I'd actually have to say, someone asked, is this like the first time ever that this has happened? From what I can tell, this appears to be the first time ever in history that this has actually happened to where U.S. Air Forces have been allowed to operate in Israel. I can't find any examples of that historically from any other time in the past. So this appears to be the first. So I'll have to do a little bit more looking on that. That was a quick cursory glance to see if I could find anything. I couldn't. So we're going to be seeing if that is true, but it largely appears to be the case for now. I would say that this is most likely a multi-pronged sort of an approach to deter Iran from hitting Israel, to also supplement Israel's air defense directly, and also get most of our aircraft a little bit closer to Iran than they would be. Because if they wouldn't be in Israel, they would most likely be in Jordan or Saudi Arabia, which had basically maxed out their capacity. So now we're seeing that a lot of the equipment is being based out of places like Greece, Turkey, and Bulgaria, which are a little bit farther away. So I think that it's actually three-pronged. I would actually say it's a really interesting poll because there really is no wrong answer in my opinion. I'd actually be with all three groups for all 3 points because it seems to be a beneficial sort of approach from all three directions. Wouldn't that be great, folks, if the Israelis could just do this all the time? I mean, wouldn't that be nice? And before a lot of people say, oh, well, the other countries that are Muslims, they wouldn't like it if the U.S. bombed Iran from Israel. Well, so, like, they don't have a problem with us bombing Iran from their own soil, from their own Arabic Islamic soil, but if it's from Israel, oh, now there's a big whoop. That doesn't make any sense. Like, the reason why the Israelis don't allow us in is because the Israelis are, the best way I can say it, the Israeli government is hyper nationalist, so they basically allow nobody in unless they're protecting Israel itself. That's why they've only allowed, over the past few years, Army ground air defense batteries into their country, and that's only to shoot down incoming missiles that are going to hit Israel. And they've never really allowed that elsewhere. This is the first time that we've ever seen it. And so I would say that's pretty impressive, but I'd also have to say, this ought to be the norm. Like this shouldn't be something that's exceptional just for the defense of Israel. I mean, you don't see Jordan and Saudi Arabia going, "Oh, you can only base your aircraft here only if you're defending Riyadh or, Mecca or something." You don't see them doing that. So it's like I feel like this should be a fairly normal arrangement from this point on,
Yeah.
instead of something to where it's just like, "Oh no, we're about to get bombed. Quick, America, come defend us." And now you can base in our country for the first time ever. But every other time, screw you, you have to fly around our airspace even.
Yeah, I wonder if the United States just happens to, turn on some intelligence gathering technology while they're inside of Israel to get a little signals intelligence. I wonder if they happen to bother with doing something like that, because Israel is hard to spy on. And also, they are an ally, but yes, we spy on each other. Israel spies on the United States. They know when we're holding stuff back. And also, it's vice versa. It goes both ways. So Israel's always a little bit concerned that maybe the U.S. might try to do some spying while they're in their territory, possibly, which, I mean, you never can tell. It's always a little bit of a thing, but it's fair enough. Mossad and CIA, they like to spy on each other, and it's what you got to do these days.
Man, one day a pilot's going to walk out there onto the Avde like tarmac. He's going to be, time to get in my F-22. What the? And it's just going to be the F-22 in multiple pieces on the ground, and some guy over there looking at like one little block of sod and going, Mossad. Like, it's going, damn it! It's gonna be like, they got this shit. And then next thing you know, the Chinese will have almost near identical replica to the F-22, just like they did, with the J-10. Remember that, Matthew, where the Israelis sold the Lavi, which was basically based almost completely off of the F-16 to China, and then lo and behold, the Chinese create an aircraft that's fairly similar to the F-16. You remember that? I remember that.
Yeah, I think I do remember that, by the way. Also, by the way, I've heard rumors that Israeli intelligence officers are not allowed into the CIA headquarters building. I've heard that rumor. I wasn't able to confirm that rumor or not, but I mean, that's how deep the whole spying goes, like between the two groups. Like it gets interesting. They've also brought in before, like a whole bunch of trinkets and stuff like that, which happen to have some interesting stuff inside of it, which it shouldn't have had. So it's just a weird thing, but it happens between the both of us. So some people are gonna be like, "Oh, Israel's always trying to screw with the United States." Yeah, but we do it to them too. Like there's always a little bit of accountability that goes on between the two. So it's just what happens.
Also, I saw someone say, I see some people talking about the whole Israeli thing and our relations with them. Some people are like, we have been friends with them ever since the end of World War II. No, we have not. Actually, at one point, we actually condemned the Israelis nationally back in 1956 during the Suez Crisis, which is something a lot of people don't know. But back in 1956, there was this thing that happened called the Suez Crisis, and it's basically where this dictator in Egypt called Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal and took it from the British. And the British and the French had an agreement that their military vessels would be prioritized for transit through the Suez Canal. And Nasser basically threw that out the window when he nationalized the canal. So, the British and the French teamed up with the Israelis in 1956 to go take control of the canal. And so the Israelis conducted a ground offensive supported by the British and the French navally to push through the Sinai Peninsula, which is this little land right here, to the Suez Canal and take control of it. And then also the Israeli government was kind of shooting to overthrow Nasser because Nasser was supporting this group at the time called the Fatah, which was basically the Hamas of that time. When the Israelis took control of the Suez Canal, Eisenhower, who was the president at the time, openly condemned Britain, France, and Israel for their attempted seizure in violation of international law of the Suez Canal, and forced the Israelis, under the threat of U.S. military intervention, to release the Suez Canal back to the Egyptian government or else face the wrath of the United States. Our relations with Israel are actually fairly nuanced ever since the end of the Second World War, because for a larger part, up until about really the 80s, we really didn't give Israel a hoot for the most part. If you looked at the Israeli military equipment of the day, way back in the 60s and 70s, it usually was mostly French and British supplied equipment. It was only up around the 80s that they started to get U.S. equipment. But anyways, enough of that rabbit hole. It's an interesting one, though, nonetheless. But moving on from that and on into Lebanon, we've also been able to hear that there was a statement made today by Hezbollah. Let's take a look at this little statement. If it loads. If it loads. Hopefully it will. And we're waiting for it. Oh, and it appears there's a little bit of an issue going on right now. So hang on just a minute, folks. We're going to be getting to the bottom of this. And hold up, folks. I'm going to have to do something really quickly. So hang on, folks, and we're going to be right back in just a quick second.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Перли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу.
All right, everyone, and we are back, and sadly, there is a little bit of bad news. It appears that Discord has actually gone down at the moment, and we're getting a little bit of more information about that at the moment. And really quickly, let me see if I can get some information from Matthew here, because I think he's going to have some. So really quickly, folks, I'm going to call him, and we're going to talk about that quickly on air, because Discord is a heavy part of our show, considering that it allows us to talk to each other. So really quickly, we're going to give him a call, and we're going to see what's going on here. So give us just a second, folks. Hopefully y'all can hear this on air. Oh, hello? All right, Matthew, you're alive on air right now, and I'm just hearing from you that Discord appears to be down. So if you want to, considering that you can't talk on Discord right now, would you like to explain the situation to everyone? Because this is news to me, and I think it's news to a lot of the folks out there on the chat at the moment.
Oh, well, yeah, Discord's down. That's pretty much the bottom line of it. So let me see if I can try to fix this thing on my end, and I'll see what I can do.
All right, so hopefully we'll be able to see if something works here, but it appears, folks, the Discord's down. So a big thanks for giving that information, Matthew. We're going to be pushing on with the show, and hopefully we can try and get Discord working at some point here soon. So with that, folks, I'm going to be getting Matthew off the phone, and we're actually going to be continuing with the show for now. Hopefully we'll be able to see that Discord comes back up soon, but for now, we'll generally have to forgo the question segment because I actually can't get Matthew live on air at the moment for us to be able to knock out the question segment normally. So we're just going to start continuing to push through with news coverage to be able to keep this thing rolling. And so with that, folks, we are going to be moving on into the rest of our news in the Middle East, as we also were able to hear that around 250 combat aircraft are currently stationed within the Middle East. And we actually were able to see some very interesting satellite photography today from the area of the Prince Sultan Air Base, which is showing us a significant number of F-16s, and also it appears that Discord might be working again, and let's see if it is, folks. And hello?
There we go. So apparently just a little glitch right there. We mentioned Israel, so we got a glitch on our hands. There's no correlation at all, by the way.
And also, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, good. It's just making sure. And also, you can see the screen share?
Yeah, I can see that too as well.
Got you. So, for some reason, folks, we had a weird issue, and I can't really explain it. It's just, like, Mandy, do you know what happened?
I have no idea, honestly. Discord would not load. Like, I tried to reload the program itself on the computer. It would not load at all. So it seemed to be a momentary Discord issue is what it seemed like to me. So I think it might have been on their end, possibly.
Yeah, because also, folks, when I threw up my intro card, I restarted my Discord, and believe it or not, Matthew, mine did the same thing, actually. It completely shut off for a minute, and then it turned back on. So I guess, folks, that what we were talking about is verboten. But anyways, I'm just kidding, folks. I'm just playing. Clearly, that wouldn't be the case. But getting us back into our news, and also getting Matthew up to speed, since he wasn't here for just a moment there on air. And sorry, everyone, about that interruption to our usual generally seamless sort of a coverage, but we are actually looking at the satellite photography that the Chinese put out today from the Prince Sultan Air Base, and we've actually been able to see, folks, a very interesting buildup here, particularly a large group of F-35s and EA-18G Prowler electronic warfare aircraft. We also were able to see in another part of the tarmac the prior large buildup that we had already covered, which was the large number of KC-135 Stratotankers and the humongous number of E-3 Century AWACS that are also based at the Prince Sultan Air Base currently. And we also were able to see an even larger number of aircraft in this wide shot here of the entirety of the Prince Sultan Air Base, once again showing the incredibly large number of C-130s, E-11s, the E-3s, the E-11s and the E-3s are all some version of electronic warfare and AWACS aircraft, and also some KC-46 and a C-5 Galaxy. all at Prince Sultan Air Base along with the combat aircraft. From what we know, there's about 250 combat aircraft that are currently within the area of the Middle East. That's not including all of the tankers, the AWACS, and the additional support aircraft that help out those fighter jets in conducting their actual airborne operations. So right now, we understand that in terms of combat air power, around 20% of the entire presence of the U.S. Air Force is currently within the area of the Prince Sultan Air Base, which is a fairly interesting thing to hear, and also showing us that there is still a large amount of U.S. air presence throughout the entirety of the Middle East. While this is going on, the Iranians are trying to make one last shot at buying a little bit of time along with the United States. Talks are planned for tomorrow, and that means that here within a couple of hours, those talks are going to happen and end, because tomorrow is right now in Iran's time. But Iran did hand its nuclear deal proposal to the Omani foreign minister to then forward to the United States ahead of tomorrow's talks with the U.S. in Muscat, Oman, once again. We can also confirm that the elements of the Fifth Fleet, which were based at the Bahrain Naval Station, have been able to break out into the open sea and have safely transited the Strait of Hormuz and are currently somewhere within the Gulf of Oman or the Northern Arabian Sea, meaning that they will not be in the line of fire once strikes begin. So with that in mind, there's another humongous thing that I have to talk about now that we've gotten through everything directly in the Middle East and most everything concerning the Middle East that came out of the U.S. government today, and that is particularly this statement. According to some, the current administration believes that depleting U.S. munitions stockpiles in a prolonged conflict with Iran could create an opening for China to take advantage and act against Taiwan. This is something that I gotta say, folks, before we even get to the poll. This is a load of bogus right here. But, Matthew, what are people thinking about this? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so the analysts are trying to warn the U.S. officials that depleting U.S. ammo stocks on Iran could allow China to invade Taiwan. And what are your thoughts? 42% said China will not move on Taiwan in that situation, while 32% said China will move on Taiwan, and 18% said I'm 50-50 on this one. And this one, I will say, I'm not with the enforcer on this one, in my opinion. I am a little bit split on this one, actually. If they're specifically referencing, by the way, if the U.S. gets in a prolonged, multi-month conflict with Iran, and we have to start really putting a lot of effort into this situation, meaning spending tons of ammo, tons of missiles, and things like that on Iran itself, then that could give China the opening or advantage that it needs to feel comfortable moving against Taiwan, because we would have so many assets pretty much dedicated to the region in the Middle East that we wouldn't be able to respond to China effectively, and it would give them a massive leap. And I would say there is some truth to it, but I think they're exaggerating it a little bit for a dramatic effect. So I'm with the 18%. I'm 50-50. The U.S. ammo stocks would be depleted, but only 30% of our Navy is in the Middle East right now. So it's not all of it, by the way. And also, if things get out of hand, we'll have to pick and choose. What's more important, Iran or Taiwan? We'll have to pick and choose in that situation. So I have a feeling we can move enough assets to help Taiwan if we wanted to. So I'm with the 50-50. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm actually with the 42%. China will not move on Taiwan. And also, munitions are not an issue because there's this really cool thing called factories and ammunition facilities in particular, which produce the munitions required for our great armed forces of the Republic to span the globe and to be able to fight for liberty, democracy, and oil every corner of the globe that there is. And so I would have to say that generally I would be with a 43%. I don't think China's going to move on Taiwan, and I also got to say, I don't know why in the world everyone always says this like this is an issue, because if they already knew that, they could just start putting out bids right now for people to start producing even more munitions at a faster and higher rate, so that way if the Chinese moved on Taiwan, we have enough munitions to deal with two fronts at one time. Like, it's always weird to me, though, that whenever something's coming around, someone always goes, like with the British, they only have 6 months of munitions. It's like, well, obviously they're not going to have 4 years. They're not in a war, and that would be a waste of money. And, munitions eventually wear down in storage to where they're unusable and have to be disposed of. So why in the world would they waste that money? It's like, there's a thing called a factory. You can just produce more munitions. You can produce more equipment. And that's one thing that the United States could easily do. We already know that they've been ramping that up recently, and I'd have to say that would be very hypocritical of the United States to be talking about Europe is weak and feeble and useless and they're going to get steamrolled in a war, if even our government is saying, we don't have enough munitions to do everything. It's like, well, what are you dissing on the Europeans for? They're in the same boat. It's like, that would be absolutely hypocritical.
But even if you don't focus solely on the ammunition issue that the analysts keep bringing up, there is still an element of distraction that China could capitalize on because the U.S. will be distracted. Because remember, in the situation we're talking about, the U.S. is in a prolonged war with Iran, so we're knee deep in it. That's the scenario. There would be a distraction element to it where China could capitalize on that because the U.S., with their focus being on Iran, that would be a bit of a tough shift to then move away from Iran or try to like divvy up forces to then go respond to Taiwan, which is a major issue on its own accord. Could be a larger situation than Iran, actually. That would be a bit of a problem to split the focus between the two when it comes to actually dealing with those two fronts. So, what I guess the question really is, what is China looking for? What is the big break that China is looking for to actually pull off the invasion? Because we've heard from intelligence reports that China is going to invade Taiwan at some point, but what is the crux of what they're waiting for right now? And that's the question that nobody really knows the answer to.
And that is true. We don't know the answer to that, but we still would get an idea that right now the Chinese will probably invade sometime in 2027, because that's when we believe that they'll be ready, at least on the amphibious end, to create an amphibious landing in Taiwan that could have a reasonable chance of success. So I would still say that we have a decent amount of time right now, at least 10 months, before the Taiwan situation becomes an imminent issue. And I think that we should definitely take the advantage that we have right now, which is that China is still prepping to invade Taiwan, and we should deal with Iran while we have the moment.
Yeah, probably so. Also, I see some people saying that China's waiting on Russia. There is some truth to that, at least I personally believe. China is trying to see how Russia is going to survive the Ukraine war, and they're also basically trying to see how NATO is going to respond to it. They're trying to see what is NATO's resolve. Unfortunately, though, it's already becoming very apparent that NATO is not as strong as it used to be. The alliance is generally consisting of Europe and pretty much excluding the United States at this point. They're technically on paper still allies, but in reality, there's a lot of dissension taking place between those two major groups within NATO. So I think that might be becoming less of an issue than it was previously about how that's going to play out in Ukraine with NATO. I think it's becoming less of an issue for China. I think at this point, they're pretty much waiting to see the chip situation. I think that's what they're waiting to see. How dedicated is the West and also Taiwan to destroying those facilities if an invasion takes place? That's part of it. But I'll be honest, I'm not really entirely sure what China's waiting for at this point because they've had a chance to do it. They've also built up a ton of invasion forces to try to invade Taiwan. It could be that maybe their internal strife within the government with Xi Jinping and his PLA forces, maybe there's so much dissension that they're worried that that would destabilize the country too much at a time where they're currently internally divided. That could be part of it as well, but it's just hard to really say for certain.
I would agree. And so with that, folks, it is time for us to move on, speaking of which, into the rest of the news. Also, hold up, I have one more thing to cover, folks. Just one more thing from the Middle East. I just saw it, and I didn't see it until now. It's at Diego Garcia. We do have to cover what's going on down at Diego Garcia for a brief moment, because we did get to hear that now Britain on Wednesday walked back its earlier statement that it had paused ratifying a deal to hand over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands, and now it appears that they might be pushing on with it anyways. So we'll have to see what's going on with that. This is generally not a good move. It's a 99-year lease, and technically Mauritius doesn't take control of the island for the next 99 years, and there's no way for them to accelerate the lease. That's not how these leases work, to where they can just say, okay, we're foreclosing on it, and then they take it. That's not how these happen. It's basically saying you own the land for the next 99 years, but you guarantee in 99 years we get it back. So even if the British agree to this wouldn't be a problem for about the next 100 years. But it's still not a good idea because it is giving over a strategically important island in the middle of the Indian Ocean to a country that's generally aligned with the Chinese. So that's just not a great idea. Wouldn't be a smart one.
Sir Stormer seems like he's a little bit goofy. He seems like he's not exactly bright in the brain, it seems like. This is a really dumb move. Honestly, this is about as dumb as it gets when it comes to making stupid moves geopolitically. Pretty stupid. Like, this goes beyond virtue signaling. Like, this isn't even that. It's like, why the hell you give away an island to a country aligned with our enemy? I mean, that's something there that makes me really question where the hell that guy's thoughts are really lying at this point. It's like, what's wrong with this guy?
You have spoken great slander against His Majesty's government and will be subject to prison. But beyond that,
He's a plonker.
but beyond that, this is absolutely stupid. Like, I'll say that, kind of like pissing on the Britain's heads about this isn't a good move. But this is like, if we're speaking candidly here, this is markedly stupid. I mean, this is beyond stupid. I mean, the thing about it is, folks, is that the British government right now is going, "Oh, we're so sorry for colonizing your little island. We'll give it back to you." Mauritius is never. Here's Mauritius. There they are. You know how far Mauritius is from the Diego Garcia Island? It's 1,400 miles away. This is like New York to LA type distances here of open ocean. I mean, hell, even the Maldives is closer to Diego Garcia than Mauritius even. And so we're saying, the British are saying, "We're so sorry that we colonized your little island and there's not a damn village left on it, but we're gonna give it back to you because we're sorries," right? It's like,
Yes.
what the hell?
As a way to make our apologies, we're going to sacrifice the entire West national security to apologize for taking this land. It's like, I don't think we want to go that far, okay? We don't really want to go that far with sacrificing our national security in the Middle East for the entire Western security. It's like, we don't want to go that far to make a statement. It's like, I'm sorry that the land was taken. I'm genuinely actually sorry that they did misplace the locals. Like, that was obviously not good. But we have it now. We need it for national security. Why the hell give it to a country aligned with our enemy? That's stupid.
You know, I gotta say, folks, here's the thing that I don't really get about this. Like, it's sure, a decent amount, well, not even a decent amount, I think it was like literally just a few hundred island peoples were displaced from this island 70 years ago to make this military base. But that was 70 years ago. It's so long ago. It's as long ago as World War II. And then on top of that, another thing is, this is like, you know, we all sit there and go, "Oh, the poor people who were displaced from that island." Who the hell's going, those poor people, for all the folks who were displaced in the United States, the thousands of them from eminent domain for military installations here? I don't see anyone going, "We're so sorry for eminent domaining your house to turn it into a bombing range. So here's some money. You can move right back in." I don't see anyone doing that. It's like, I gotta be honest with y'all. Like, if I would get it if it was just land that was taken and it served no purpose and they're just holding it. But it's a strategic military facility. That makes no sense to give this up even if it's 99 years from now. It's like, that wouldn't make any damn sense. It's ridiculous, really, but I hope that they eventually reverse the decision, because as far as diplomacy goes, I cannot say enough how absolutely stupid giving away Diego Garcia is. But when it comes to the U.S. government dealing with the British, when you're in foreign policy and diplomacy, you always have to deal with people real sweet like, so you have to talk to them really nice and be like, "Now, Britain, what happens if we give away Diego Garcia? We get screwed by the Chinese," you know, and then we have to talk to them that way, and then eventually, hopefully, they'll see sense and back off of this. Or a new government might get elected in the UK, and then they'll back off of that way, because I think a snap election might be coming around here in a bit. And if that's the case, I think I'll be entirely honest with you. I think any other prime minister but this guy, no matter whose party, would generally say that this is a stupid idea. But anyways, it is time for us to move on into the rest of the news that we have for the night. But before we get to that, we do have to get to a question segment, because unfortunately we weren't able to get to one on time about 15 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago or so, because Discord died and then came back to life. So, Matthew, what kind of questions do we have? We're going to be taking 3, folks, and then we're going to be getting right back to the news.
All right, so giving a shout out to our first 3 super chatters, and getting right back to the news, because we're starting to run a little bit late and behind. This one goes to Hackneys and Rhinelanders, who puts in a $100 support. And thank you very much, Hackneys, for that very generous support. One of the largest super chats of the night. And we appreciate you for being a longtime channel legend as well. And he said, "Thank you, Enforcers, for all your work."
And thank you so much for the incredible support, and thank you for enjoying our work, Hackneys and Rhinelanders, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be on air every night, making sure to keep our lights on, to pay our bills, and to eat that delicious, succulent Costco chicken. If it wasn't for folks like you, none of that would be possible, and we wouldn't be able to dedicate ourselves every single day to working on the show. And so, humongous thanks to you so much once again for that unbelievably amazing support, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $100 support from Nick Hines as well. Also another longtime channel legend. He puts in a 100 just like Hackneys. And thank you very much, Nick, for that massive support, by the way. He's doing that quite a bit these days, and we appreciate that very, very much. And Nick said, "LSA forever."
And thank you so much for the incredible support, and LSA forever indeed, Nick Hines. And a humongous thanks to you as well for being one of our great friends up there in Canada and helping this channel to keep running and keep covering the news each and every single day. So tremendous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the last question of the segment, and then we're getting right back into the rest of the news.
All right, so our last one of the segment goes to Circuit Medic UK, who put in a $50 support, and thank you very much, Medic, for that very generous support as well. And he said, "Good morning, Enforcer Matt, Renegade here. I just got to drop off our regular contribution toward the juicy Costco chicken, and also a massive thank you for the 1,463 days for all of us watching of coverage. Many thanks, lads, and LLT LSA."
Thank you so much for the support, Circuit, and helping this channel to keep on running, all the way from the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And a good morning to you over there. It's actually very early in the morning for y'all. I think it's like 4 in the morning, somewhere around there right now. And I gotta say, a humongous thanks to you for dropping off the support for the juicy Costco chickens. And a humongous thanks to you for watching for so long as well. You've been around for an incredibly long time, an old guard. And I gotta thank you incredibly for that support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running every day and have a succulent Costco chicken. And Ross Munden just asked something that's almost on the borderline of heresy. He said, "Is Costco chicken good?" You would insinuate that there is any answer that would say that that's bad? Heresy. But the truth is that it's delicious. It's actually a very tender, succulent chicken, and it's only $4.99. We're not sponsored by Costco, but I do have to say, it's an unbelievably good deal. And so with that, that does address that incredibly well. And a humongous thanks to you so much once again, Circuit Medic UK, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it's time for us to move on into the rest of our news. Moving us on out of the Middle East and on towards the Americas, we have been able to get some interesting news out of Mexico and some very interesting news out of Cuba. I mean, I really don't even know of a way to word it specifically, but we heard of an incident today that is getting basically no press from the U.S. government, although apparently, according at least to the Cuban government's claims, 4 American citizens were killed in the firefight that followed. Apparently, at some point, we were able to hear that a boat, this one in particular, apparently this one ain't loading. Dang. Sadly, we can't show you all the picture.
Here, I got you real quick. I got you. Pull up this boat right here on a different screen. Get a stock image of it so that we can show people exactly what we're working with here. Let me go get the name of this boat real quick.
Gotcha.
So pull up a 1981 Proline 24-foot center console. That's the type of boat we're looking at here that allegedly went down toward Cuba's coast.
So, this is a picture of the exact boat. This is the one that we generally know went towards Cuba, at least from what we're hearing right now. Apparently on board was 10 people on this wildly small, this is basically a fishing boat, and about 10 people were on it apparently. But we were able to hear afterwards a statement that came out from the Cuban embassy, where they generally described the situation as it was ongoing. And this is a note from the Ministry of the Interior of the Cuban embassy in the U.S. On the morning of February 25th, 2026, a violating speedboat was detected within Cuban territorial waters. The vessel, registered in Florida, United States, with registration number FL7726SH, approached up to 1 nautical mile northeast of the El Pino Channel in Cayo Falcones in the Corralillo municipality in Villa Clara. When a service unit of the border guard troops of the Ministry of the Interior, carrying 5 service members, approached the vessel for identification, the crew of the violating speedboat opened fire on Cuban personnel, resulting in the injury of the commander of the Cuban vessel. As a consequence of the confrontation, as of the time of this report, 4 aggressors on the foreign vessel were killed and 6 were injured. The injured individuals were evacuated and received medical assistance. In the face of current challenges, Cuba reaffirms its determination to protect its territorial waters, based on the principle that national defense is a fundamental pillar of the Cuban state in safeguarding its sovereignty and ensuring stability in the region. Investigations by the competent authorities continue in order to fully clarify the events. That was the statement from the Cuban embassy today, officially, on what exactly happened down in basically a mile off of Cuba's coast. We don't really know what happened in particular, and we did get a little bit more details from the incident, and apparently, according to the Cuban officials now, they were able to recover some form of explosives, a large amount of munitions, and rifles from the vessel, which is a little bit interesting, to say the least. And a lot of people are wondering what is up with this incident. And also, to let y'all know this, the U.S. government is treating this very low key at the moment. We're not really hearing a lot of official statements from the situation. And from what we know, 4 U.S. citizens died in this, but we're not hearing a lot of stir about it at the moment. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so this is the closest thing we have to a very interesting mystery that's currently unfolding today. And I've done a lot of research into this to figure out exactly what's been happening. I've researched the boat. I've also looked into the registration and things like that. I want to make it clear from the get-go, though. All of this is allegedly, it's all stuff that we believe is the case. But take it with a grain of salt, though. It's all based on preliminary information. But so far, according to reports, apparently the boat that was used, that you saw a picture of a moment ago, that little 24-foot center console fishing boat, that boat was reported stolen, according to reports. It apparently was stolen from Florida, and there were about 8 guys on the vessel when it went down, allegedly, to the Cuban coast, and it was like right off the Cuban coast when the Cuban Coast Guard rolled up on the boat and said, "Hey, what are y'all doing?" According to the Cubans, the guys in the boat whipped out assault rifles and started firing at the Coast Guard. That's the claim. And then apparently the Coast Guard took out 4 of the guys in the boat, which is about half of them, and the rest of them survived. So that is the claim. But there's a couple of problems. The Cubans are claiming that the boat was full of ammunition, machine guns, bombs, and things like that. That's what the Cubans are claiming. So the Cubans are saying that this was a U.S.-backed operation to send in basically hybrid warfare operatives into Cuba to cause major situations of terrorism. That's what they're claiming, which would seem to line up with what happened in Venezuela, by the way. We saw fires and explosions breaking out in Venezuela, allegedly at the hands of U.S. agents. So that's what the Cubans are claiming. Now, on the other hand, the U.S. government's not saying exactly what these guys were doing on the boat. They're saying that maybe it was just some fishermen or something of that nature. They're not entirely sure. They can't really confirm or deny very much of it, which it is a little bit suspicious, I will say that. Maybe they're trying to gather more information, but we're not really sure about that. So all we know is the boat was apparently reported stolen. There was 8 guys, 4 of them died, and there's claimed to be some weapons on the boat. Outside of that, we don't know pretty much anything outside of this. So it's up to you what this whole situation is. But it looks like on the poll, though, 40% said maybe it's some Cuban smuggling operation, because there is some smuggling that takes place from Florida to Cuba, while 23% said maybe it's some CIA operation, and 18% said maybe it's some crazy tourists. And I'll be honest, it's an even split between them all. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure if to believe the Cubans, because the Cubans, of course, being an enemy state, it's really sketchy to believe anything they say. But at the same time, though, the government, the U.S. government, is not really giving us many answers to the point where it makes me a little bit suspicious, actually. So we'll just have to see. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm going to be entirely honest with y'all. I feel like this is probably CIA related. Like, if something about this is screaming a little bit unusual from the facts, well, not really the facts, but the details we're kind of getting at this point. Of course, they're alleged details. We don't know the exact information around it yet, and there has been a lot of statements from the U.S. government. But the fact that it appeared that they were incredibly close to the Cuban coast, less than a mile away, which is basically on the coast, and the fact that they fired upon the Cuban Coast Guard, and it seems as though that these were just random people armed in a large group, basically a squad-sized element on a boat. It sounds odd. Like, there are smuggling operations to go on, but there is no smuggling operation where most of the cargo hold is apparently filled with explosives and ammunition, you know? It seems to be a little bit odd. And also, I do have to say, folks, that the story of Cuba in the present day, it all started with one boat. One singular boat. The Grandma. This one. This is actually what Fidel Castro used. He bought it, I think, in Miami. And they sailed all the way around Cuba and then landed on southern end, kind of around the Bay of Pigs, actually, funnily enough. And that's when they started their communist revolution against the dictator of Cuba at the time, who was Bautista. Basically everything in Cuba, it never has to do with a ship. It has to do with a boat, funnily enough. Basically every key historical moment in Cuba's history has to do with boats.
Yeah. Also, by the way, somebody brought up a really good point. I brought this up, by the way. It was me and Andrew were discussing this one off there too. I said, how the Cubans detect this boat? Because the Cubans are very badly underfunded. So how did they even know this thing was approaching their coast? Because they don't really have any way to detect it, at least a reliable way to detect something approaching their coast like that. So I guess they got lucky, or perhaps they were tipped off that it was going to show up, one or the other, because I'm not really sure how they happened to just run across this little fishing boat that was pulling up to the coast. Also, by the way, some people said, I doubt the CIA would use a fishing boat to send in operatives. You're actually very much wrong on that. They would certainly use a fishing boat to send in operatives. That would be one way they would definitely send them in, because you don't want to send them in like on a huge boat that says like CIA on the side of it or something like that. That would be a horrible idea. No, you want to send them in on something that's a little bit inconspicuous and something that could be plausibly deniable for the most part. So it is possible. There's an inkling of percentage chance that maybe the CIA was involved in this in some way or another, and they were trying to plant agents inside of Cuba to cause chaos. Because that is in the U.S. playbook, by the way. That is something the U.S. does actually perform. They did it in Venezuela as well, and nobody really caught them getting into Venezuela. Like, we never really found out how they got there. They simply snuck into the country, and then they started causing fires and all kinds of stuff all over the place. What kind of like what's happening in Iran actually right now, by the way. So I mean, this is an interesting one. This one's honestly piqued my interest quite a bit, but we don't really have any concrete answers even right now.
And also, really quickly, Matthew, to say this, because obviously, Matthew, you're completely wrong. The CIA wouldn't use something as lowly as a fishing boat. They would use a research vessel, obviously, because that doesn't scream CIA.
Oh, hell no. They wouldn't use that. Man, that screen, you don't even have to have CIA on the side of something like that. The pure amount of money it takes to buy a vessel like that says the feds are involved.
Yeah, that's the joke. I was like, bro, this is gonna absolutely win over the crowd. But beyond that, though, the CIA folks, like, the CIA is, and the MI6 and all the other intelligence agencies, they're not like the spy movies, you know, where they have like a watch and you spin like the dial on the watch and then it turns into like a super duper submersible speedboat or something like that. That doesn't happen. They will go and just spend some money in Florida to go buy like a little boat like that or something and send some people down to Cuba, because it's always the most mundane looking things that aren't noticed. Like, they're going to notice some giant research ship, or they're going to notice something that screams high-tech militaristic style technology. But the one thing that generally most people aren't going to notice and most people would overlook is something like a fishing boat. It's obvious. I mean, it's so mundane, normal, and it would also be so plainly obvious. Most people would think that just wouldn't be the case, but that is the case. The most obvious answers and the cheapest way is the easiest way for the most part. But anyways, moving on out of Cuba, we have been able to hear that there is still ongoing troubles within central Mexico as the Jalisco cartel is continuing to fight the Mexican government. We didn't get all of the footage out of Mexico today because, of course, we do have a lot to cover and we still have a lot more to go inside of Asia and Europe as well. But moving us on down into Mexico, we were able to see that a heavy battle occurred today between the cartel and the Mexican National Guard within the city of Tuxpan, which is inside the Jalisco state. And we were able to see that some Mexican military helicopters were flying overhead. You also hear the firefight a little bit.
Ay, 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 ay.
Oh, poor dog. Moving on from that, we then got to see the National Guard down the street in the midst of the firefight. This video is not graphic, by the way. We did pre-vet this, so here's the clip.
Oh, look at him go. What is that in the background? Is that music?
I don't know. I think it's someone talking in this house, and it's just like really echoey, I think.
Also, by the way, I'm not sure if y'all seen it, but you see that white box truck right there, by the way?
Yeah.
Apparently, the cartels have very similar white box trucks just like that, but in the back of that box, on the back of the truck, there's actually like a sliding turret, like a machine gun turret that actually slides to the back of the truck, and it turns into basically a mobile technical in the back of one of those like cargo vans right there. It's pretty crazy. They're using civilian vehicles, the cartel is, to cover their tracks wherever they go with these massive machine guns. It's kind of impressive.
Yeah, it is. I would say at this point, folks, this is basically a full-on war that's going on in central Mexico. It's pretty wild to watch, but I do have to say that both sides are generally giving it all they got. I mean, the National Guard and the Army of Mexico is fighting tooth and nail at this point against the cartel, but the cartel is also giving a run for its money still. I mean, it's a really wild to watch. I mean, this is two groups going at it every day at this point without end. Even at nighttime, there's firefights breaking out through most of the areas of the Jalisco state and elsewhere. But moving on from that and on out of the Jalisco state, we also were able to hear that apparently there was a cyber attack conducted on the Mexican government recently, apparently allegedly using a chatbot or an AI chatbot that apparently was able to steal sensitive government employee credentials and tax and voter information, according to Bloomberg. So it appears that we don't really know who did this. It might be the cartel, but it appears that someone has been able to hack into some Mexican governmental systems and get some key intel out of it. We've also been able to hear that apparently the cartel issued a warning, which has now ceased to exist, sadly. But they had issued a
I
warning that
reposted. I think I reposted it at the very top. By the way, let's see here. Let's see. Is it the one from the Mexican government saying about the warning about the cartels?
yes, be on high alert because they wanted the release of the body.
Yeah, so apparently people are removing that for whatever reason. I think the Mexican government's trying to like cover up the fact that they're still fighting the cartel. So I've got it right here. Oh, there you go. You got it right there.
Yeah, so according to this statement here, and I'll try and read it for y'all, but I'm not incredibly good at Spanish, but I have a decent understanding of it. This is a notice about the notice of Chihuahua that was given today, where it apparently stated that the Jalisco New Generation Cartel was demanding the release of the body of El Mencho, named right here, Nemesio Seguera Cervantes, that's his actual name, by about 1 p.m. the next day. Otherwise, the cartel was going to go forward and start killing, it says right here, proceed to kill public officials and civilians immediately that day. And so it seems as though, as a result of this, we have been able to see that the Mexican government has issued this memo for the following: to alert military personnel in the proper jurisdictions, to be able to see that there is a permanent presence of the authorities within specific areas. We've also been able to see that additional actions have been made as well. Let me see if I can get a summary of this on top of this. Let's see here. Dang.
You know, there's a good thing. It's called Google Lens. If you point it at this document, it'll translate the whole thing.
Well, that's too easy, man. Like that's too damn easy. Like I can't do that. I can't do that. We've gotta be able to try and translate. But outside of that, though, just to give you all a summary, because the other points are generally adding on to the first two, which are the most important. They're basically putting the civil and military authorities within the specific states of Mexico on high alert for tomorrow, because the chances are very high they're not going to release the body of El Mencho. As a matter of fact, the chances are almost absolute they are not going to release the body of El Mencho, which means that a new wave of battles, chaos, and general destruction will start to reach central Mexico by about 1 p.m. tomorrow, local time in that area. So that appears to be the case, at least at the moment, and it does appear that
So
the.
So also, by the way, I translated the document. So basically, to outline exactly what this document's saying, like in reality, the Mexican government is warning their forces, especially the National Guard forces, to basically deploy in your jurisdictions and do not get surprised by these surprise attacks that they're expecting the CJNG to conduct. They're also saying that the forces should maintain permanent contact with authorities at all three levels of government to strengthen coordination. They're also saying to monitor open sources, like us, to make sure they're up to date with the information. They're also saying to, let's say, there's a lot of just wordy language here as well. So yeah, basically they're telling them just to be ready for surprise attacks. So they're warning of burning of vehicles, also setting up roadblocks, which they've already been doing before. So it's basically a continuation of what they're doing. And they actually bring a quote from the cartel. They say, if the demands are not met to turn over the body of the former cartel leader, then the cartel will, quote unquote, march in blood throughout Mexico. That's what the report right here says. So that's just generally what it's saying. It's pretty much a continuation of what they've already been doing.
Yeah, so it does appear that they are apparently threatening to even increase the violence if the body is not released back to the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, and we'll have to see if that happens. And I see some people talking about, oh wow, the Mexican government's saying to keep notified. Yeah, from what we can tell, everybody on both ends here are trying to stay notified of the information via open sources. So it's a fairly interesting sort of a thing. Apparently, everyone in Mexico, cartels and government included, are all basically kind of looking towards sources like us to see what's going on down there in the wider, bigger picture, which is pretty wild to think, but that's actually ongoing at the moment. But with that, it is time for us to move on out of the news from Mexico and the ongoing fighting within central Mexico, which hopefully we'll be able to get even more in-depth coverage on here in the near future, because I'll be entirely honest with you all, this is deeply interesting to me, and I wish that we could cover it more today. Moving on from Mexico, though, and on into the United States of America to cover a little bit of additional news that came out today that I have to say is, of course, everyone in the United States is innocent until proven guilty, but if this man who has been alleged of these crimes is found guilty, I'm going to be deeply disappointed and quite angered, to say the least. We'll have to see how the trial goes, however. But we have been able to hear that a former U.S. training pilot, and this is an official statement from the FBI's official Twitter account, that a former U.S. Air Force pilot has been arrested for providing defense services to the Chinese military. Specifically, this is a statement as follows. Gerald Brown, a former F-35 Lightning II instructor pilot with decades of experience flying U.S. military aircraft, allegedly betrayed his country by training Chinese